All right. I'm so excited you're here, Anna. Thank you so much for taking the time to join.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I wanted to jump in. You're a neurodiversity coach, and I was wondering, I wanted to first start kind of how you decided to go into that area, and then also if you could kind of give a little background to everybody what that kind of looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So neurodiversity is talking about different brain types that we have, different ways of experiencing the world. So some examples might be ADHD, dyslexia, autism, and there are others. It's a big umbrella term. And the reason that I talk about neurodiversity or neurodivergence rather than a specific neurotype is because actually there's a high degree of co-occurrence across neurotypes. And for me, it's people that are important, not labels.
Right.
So by having this umbrella label, we make sure that every part of a person is included rather than I can only deal with this part of you. You've got to go somewhere else for that part.
Sure. That's wonderful. And how did you decide to get into coaching, and what was it that drew you to neurodiversity in general?
Yeah, so I got into coaching 4.5 years ago when I was working. I built and was leading a machine learning company in an organization. So I was wearing a lot of hats because
Mhm.
it was a fast-growing organization. And I was also a mum to two, and it was too much, right? All of the hats at work and all of the hats at home.
Yes.
So I decided I was going to need to leave and help my eldest kind of settle into school and manage that transition. And so I thought, well, what do I enjoy most of all the hats that I'm wearing at work?
Mhm.
And I realized it was the moments when people would just kind of come and appear at my desk and go, I've heard you're good to talk to. Can we talk about a thing? And I love that. I would always just put down whatever I was supposed to be doing. Yes, let's go. Let's have a chat. I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if I could make that my job? And somehow I have.
I love that so much. It's interesting. I have so many guests on who I always love to know an origin story and kind of what piqued your interest into it or what led you down that road. And so many people will say, like, either I wanted to become the person I needed during that journey, or I found myself naturally helping people in this way and I wanted to learn more about it and be more intentional or make that my day-to-day job. Like you said, dropping things that I was supposed to be doing so I could spend some time doing that and instead being able to focus on that is really lovely. Yeah. So
Yeah.
what I was going to ask you, what is something that can help some people? I know we tend today, especially with social media and mental health, the social media mental health of it all, like maybe people try to diagnose themselves or mislabel or whatever that looks like. I was just curious if you had kind of an idea of how do people start to recognize, like, maybe this is this or that thing that has been an issue for me might be something here. What is your kind of guidance on that?
Yeah, so I think hearing from people who've been there, people's real life experiences is so much more nuanced and helpful, really, than kind of reading the diagnosis criteria or the medical manuals, because how somebody experiences symptoms will depend on their environment, right? So if we're talking about becoming a mum, for example, the way that you experience the same brain type in that moment in your life can be really different for how somebody else is experiencing that brain type in a different environment
Right.
in their own lives. And we haven't really done enough research into women, certainly not
Mhm.
women across the life changes that we go through.
Mhm.
But women are out there and they're sharing their stories.
Hi.
And so that for me really is the best source of knowledge.
Mhm.
And yeah, you should probably go and see your doctor at some point, particularly if you want medication down the road. But
Yes.
doctors don't know everything. They're not the experts
Mhm.
on you. You're the expert on you. And so if you've found something out about yourself that is meaningful to you, I wouldn't want doctors to be kind of gatekeeping that, because they can be outdated in their understanding of how these conditions present in women.
That's absolutely correct. That's the big thing, right? If you are feeling unsettled, untethered, something feels off kilter, that's the first thing. There's no, I think some people sometimes like, well, other people have it worse, so I shouldn't complain, or whatever that looks like. And I think it's very important to say that everyone's individual journey is important. And if you feel like there could be something out there that helps, that could help you, then by all means do reach out. There's so many of us out there, professionals trying to help people make those changes. And there really is no admission criteria to be able to join in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. So I used to work, I'm also a licensed chemical dependency counselor, and I used to work at a rehab facility, and some people really found the idea of a diagnosis or a label to be really empowering. I am an addict, and that was meaningful to them and important. And I hold space for all of that. And then there were other people who the language and it just didn't track or didn't feel appropriate or felt in many, many different ways for many different people. And so whether or not you have an ADHD diagnosis or whatever that might be is less important for many of us than just here are the things that are my goals, and I'm here or how my struggles are, and how can I either overcome or go around or go through these struggles to be able to get to those goals.
Yeah, and sometimes we can worry about labeling ourselves or labeling others, but the truth is people get labels anyway, and the label might be lazy, disorganized. There are lots of
Yes,
labels that carry a great deal of shame and stigma, and sometimes it's really empowering to replace them with a more accurate label. If that's what you want to do, if that helps you, then go for it.
absolutely. And it's interesting too. You're so, man, you just said lazy, and I was like, because that's so true. There are these labels that come with ADHD or any sort of focus concern. And if nothing else, I think the first piece is always good. The most important being internal, like, am I lazy? Or is that something that's preventing me from being the most efficient in my practice? And then, of course, being able to shake off the lazy stigma, or being able to be more productive amongst your peers or, school, work, whatever, that's great. But being in the space of, hey, is that really accurate toward me? Am I actually that, or is it something else? And so that, again, yeah, being able to understand those nuances and the differences. Yeah. Okay. And so what does it look like for you when you have somebody that comes to start meeting with you? What are some of the kind of things that help you to help people feel, where do we even start? How do I acknowledge the sense of progress? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so the first time I just want to meet informally and get a little bit of sense of where that person is and answer any questions that they might have so we can get a feel for each other's personality. Whenever you're working with a coach or any kind of person like that, you're allowed to not like somebody. You're allowed to try a few people out and find the
Mhm.
person that works for you. It's so important because actually in all of this kind of work, it's the quality of that relationship that makes the biggest difference.
Mhm.
But once we've kind of agreed that we want to work together, the first session I always start with is goals. So you mentioned goals earlier, because I want to know what are your goals and I want you to understand what your goals are. So some people know their goals. More often, people don't exactly know their goals, and we work together to uncover and imagine what that better future looks like, so that we then know the steps that we're going to need to take to get there. And I get a sense of what strategies are going to be helpful, what topics we're going to need to address to
Mhm.
achieve your goals. Because two people in the same place with the same struggles who have different goals are going to need to take different paths to get where they want to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like that you mentioned that earlier too. I've noticed a lot that sometimes we do feel, you mentioned like providers and gatekeeping, and maybe they don't understand, or you're not checking enough boxes in their mind, and therefore you feel, you know, ignored or not fully understood. And it is so important for us to be able to have those conversations with people who are willing to advocate for us or help us to explain a little more what some of those things are, where they're coming from, um, and just, not feeling like another person does know the most about you. And so speaking to your own goals and what that might look like for you. And we don't operate in silos, of course. So you within yourself, you within your team, you within your family unit, whatever that looks like as well, and how all of those things kind of bleed into each other and can impact each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I do find that sometimes we have to peel back some of those layers of what other people want from us to get to actually what are your core goals. And they might be
Mhm.
formed by the environment, the family, or the work situation, but they're subtly different from what are my boss's goals for me, for example.
I do talk about that a lot with clients, with therapy clients more so, but really with anybody of like, where is that message coming from? Where is that productivity expectation? Is that really internal? Is that what you grew up with in elementary school? I've seen a lot of memes going around recently that's like, if you were in the gifted and talented program in elementary school and have ADHD, like how's that perfection procrastination going, and bonus points if you're a firstborn daughter and all of these things. But it really is, it's so many people who are like, wow, I feel so seen now. And it is, what is the internal drive? There's nothing wrong with being passionate and motivated and ambitious and wanting to get to the next step. And some of that is that society saying like you have to be constantly reaching, you can never be satisfied because satisfaction is complacency, and being able to kind of scratch, like you said, peeling back the layers to see what part of that is internal, what part of that is external, what part of that do I believe, what part of that can I leave behind, to be able to establish kind of what are your core values and therefore your goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And asking why, because I work a lot with people in a work setting. So the goal might be to get a promotion. Okay. Lots of people might have that goal. Why? For somebody, it might be about providing stability for their family. Okay, we've got that your goal is now providing stability for your family. Are there different ways to achieve that goal? Is this the best way to achieve that goal? Or for
Yeah.
somebody else, it might be to prove that I'm good enough. Okay, that's really interesting. We can dig into that, and that might take us in a totally different direction. So things that can look the same on the surface, we need to dig a bit deeper to find what's the person experiencing underneath that, to know how best to help them go where they want to go.
Mm. I really love that piece of, again, right? We grew up with this idea of what is stability? So you have to finish here, we call it high school, undergrad, get the college degree, go on and get the job, get the next promotion, get the next promotion, and certainly there is some stability there. Is there any mental health stability there? We're not sure. Certain people, varying degrees. And also too, there are multiple types of stability. There are multiple types of ways for you to feel fulfilled professionally, for you to find mental health care. And that is definitely something I think we kind of put ourselves on one track and we feel stuck on that one track. And that's got to be the goal. I love your idea of what else might that look like?
Yeah. Yeah, often with ADHD, we're multi-passionate. So we're
Mhm.
not one track people all the time,
Mhm.
and so what does that look like if we allow ourselves to think outside of the track, just to,
Mhm.
does that feel better or not?
Mhm.
Just starting to remove some of these assumptions to help people actually use their own connective thinking, problem solving skills, their own intuition about themselves by off blocking all of the outside stuff, so that
Mhm.
they get a truer sense of who they are and what they want.
Gosh, sorry, you just said that, and this is not my therapy session, but it's so interesting that you said that, right? Because I was kind of describing the way that I had grown up of like, finish high school, go to college, get a good job, da da da. And then that was a really interesting pivot for me where I was like, I'm working on, over in the United States, I'm working on Wall Street and making money and things are going well. And then a friend was like, but what do you really want to do? Like, what does that look like? And I said, well, I'm really passionate about like helping people and mental health, and people come to me when they want to like talk something out. And but I'm over here at this really fancy place. So like that's stability. And then being able to, like you said, being multi-interested, and this is something I'm passionate about, but so is this, and I'm not actually as passionate about that. And So being able to kind of decipher through those things is so helpful, and having somebody to be able to bounce those ideas off of can be so meaningful. Yeah. And so I know you talk a lot about rejection sensitivity. And I was just wondering kind of if you could unpack that a little bit for the listener.
Yeah, so it's this idea that when we perceive we're being rejected or told no or given negative feedback, it can feel almost like a physical pain. It's not just the regular experience where nobody likes those things. It's a much more intense version
Mm-hmm.
of that experience. And it comes from a few different sources, and it has really often profound impacts on a person's life because, for example, if we find negative feedback really painful, we will naturally avoid situations where we might be exposed to negative feedback. And that means not taking those steps outside our comfort zone. And it can lead to perfectionism because if I just hold on to this project just a little bit longer and I make it just a little bit better, maybe I won't get the difficult feedback when I send it. And then, of course, we get the feedback that it was late. And so
Yes.
we expect it anyway. But especially for women, but actually for everybody, it can really hold us back because it's a way that we limit ourselves to try and avoid this pain,
Mm-hmm.
taking risks, not trying new things, not doing the stuff that leads to growth and figuring out who we are and becoming the person that we want to be.
Mm-hmm. It is tough with that like how do we turn off the perfectionism? I've worked with people before where they're like, well, how do I know when I've swung too far and I'm just being lazy? And it's like, well, if we were starting on this side of the coin or this swing of the pendulum of you being so overproductive and so hard on yourself, I do think generally it might be hard for you to get to a point where you're lazy without us recognizing that along the way. It's not a flip of the switch, but I do appreciate that for some people, it's like, I don't know what rest looks like because everything feels lazy, or I don't know how to turn because it's been the perfectionism and it's been the produce, produce, produce. And so that's been an interesting journey for a number of people that I've worked with, where it's like, how do I, how am I intentional about resting or like refocusing my energies in a way that then also I'm even able to allow myself to get into that headspace? It's quite the journey.
It is, yeah. And you talked about that pendulum, and I agree, we don't flip there easily or quickly. But when somebody does manage to go maybe more towards the doing less side, I really want to celebrate that as personal growth because I don't think you can find the healthy middle ground until you've explored both the extremes a little bit. So if we spend our whole life in the overworking zone, of course we don't know where the healthy middle ground is.
Of course.
You always have to go past it, which is so hard. It's not something that will just happen, that you need to be worried about slipping accidentally over there. It
Mhm.
really takes a lot of effort to get there. But I think if you
Yes.
can get there, embrace that you have the right to sometimes be lazy, to sometimes phone it in and half-ass it. Everybody else is doing it, and it doesn't make you a less valuable human being.
It does
Yeah.
not. And I just, oh gosh, I've just had so many of these conversations where it's like some things just do come easily. And so I haven't had to work at that, but then some things come less easy and then it feels, so then again, that's that holding back of it's not perfect, so I can't send it out. And it's like, did you do your best with the information that you had and the skill set you had and the headspace you were in that day, week, whatever time period it was? And yeah, I think a lot of us struggle to give ourselves grace is kind of kind of that expectation of like, I'm just not doing enough, I'm just not pushing hard enough. And how do we unclench a little?
Well, and it comes from fear, doesn't it? Fear that if I go too far that way, something really terrible is going to happen. And
Mhm.
actually, if we are able to go too far that way, get a B on a test once in a while, then we realize it's not the end of the world. And that helps with the unclenching, it helps with the finding the safe space.
Mhm.
So I often encourage people I'm working with to be a beginner at something. maybe start a new craft or learn a musical instrument that you've never touched before. Be a beginner. And it's something I've done a few times and I find really helpful. Be a
Mhm.
beginner, fail, embrace that right to be wrong, which women in particular are robbed of. You know, the evidence shows that in schools, when girls offer an incorrect answer, they're heavily penalised by teachers and peers of both genders. Whereas when a boy offers an incorrect answer, they're encouraged to develop it and given a second chance. So we lose that right to be wrong, and it robs us of opportunities to grow, because actually, if you're taking on an exciting, ambitious new project, you might get it wrong first time and have to go back and add to it and get people to help you and learn that doing that is not the end of the world.
Mhm. But that's interesting because in that sentence, you just encourage people to ask for help, which is another thing, especially for women, that we were told. You can do anything, shoot for the stars, but do it on your own and do it right the first time. And for that's another, I sorry, I just keep saying over and over again, like, this is a conversation I have a lot. This is a conversation I have a lot. But the idea of asking for help is so foreign and so uncomfortable for so many people. But I would put it out there that if you are trying something new, and like for a project for work, let's say, and you do it right, air quotes for those not on the video, the first time, you're actually missing out on an opportunity to pivot or try to like grow from that fail or that not full success, because maybe the first thought wasn't the best thought. And so the opportunity is there to grow. And then, like I said again, and heaven forbid we ask for help, but and asking for help and getting other perspectives and getting fresh eyeballs on it um, can be so meaningful and so impactful. It's again giving ourselves the grace and the un unlearning the idea that we have to do everything on our own.
Yeah, I love when you say it right first time. Like, we know intellectually that that is an impossible standard to hold anybody to. We would never hold anybody else to that standard, but we
Of
could
course not.
hold ourselves to that standard. And that is what we need to push against, as
Mhm.
much as, you know, we need more space, we need more time, we need to relax. We
Mhm.
need to not get it right first time.
Mhm. Mhm. But that is scary. That
Yeah.
is unacceptable for so many of us. And
Yeah.
it really is. That's what's so great about the programs that you and I both offer, is like walking through some of that, unsticking some of the idea, making it feel less icky in a
Yeah.
safe space of like, what might that look like for you? And
Yeah. And
what might that
what's
look
the
like in the future?
maybe it's too scary to take a big work project and, you know, do it and it not be perfect first time, but what could you try that doesn't have to be perfect first time? Could you go to a pottery class and make a pot that isn't perfect first time?
Yes, yes. That actually, another personal anecdote coming your way. So I used to be good at the piano. Like Juilliard wasn't calling or anything, but I was, in the United States, like state level one, I did very well. Then I went to college and tried to stay up with it. And then I went on with life. And then I bought a keyboard and I was like, I'm really going to get back into it. I have two kids now. I'd love for them to get into it. It's something I really enjoyed. But that perfectionist in me knows that I won't be as good as I was when I was 18. So therefore, I don't play because I won't enjoy it as much, because I will feel less good about the product. So then I don't play, which means I can't get better because I'm not practicing. Obviously, that's not new information. And then I do, and the cycle continues, right? And so I love to be able to share when it's something that happens to me, because I want to make sure everyone's like, we're all out here doing this, team. We're all in this together. And isn't that wild though? Because I would never expect that of anybody else. I would always say, like, but that's the fun of it, right? Like, mess it up or try a whole new piece you've never learned. So then when you definitely mess it up, it won't feel as bad as not perfecting your junior year of high school piano recital piece, or right? Like, it's okay to not be good at something. And I love the idea what you're saying, like a pottery class new for me, that would be, and I'd be bad at it and be like, well, I would have liked to have been better, but I also have never done it before. And it's okay to go back to something that you once loved as well, understanding that you're not gonna maybe meet those same levels. but you're still going to be able to find some joy in it amongst the frustration as well. Like, dang it, I know I used to be able to play that piece so well or whatever. But that's okay too. Embrace the suck.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I actually did my positive psychology diploma, kind of one of the essays on practicing the recorder 5 minutes a day for I can't remember how many months, having never played the recorder myself before, starting making the most screechy, unbeautiful music. But because I committed to it for school, then that kind of kept me on it. And I really enjoyed the process. It was really nice to actually come back to music and enjoy it again, because I used to play violin when I was a child, but it was always so intertwined with that's not good enough, you're no good, practice more, all of that stuff. And actually just to leave that and start fresh on a whole new instrument just for me was
Mhm.
really, really good. Although, of course, I'm still not making beautiful sounds on complicated pieces, but actually you can make beautiful sounds on simple pieces sometimes.
And sorry, we're just compounding on the conversation with every idea, right? Because that's the other thing too. How dare you be really good at hot cross buttons? That's not Tchaikovsky, so you're failing. But you're not. You're playing these beautiful, easier pieces, but they sound lovely and you're getting enjoyment out of it. And that can be enough. And that can be the thing. And how do we shut off that language that certainly comes from within, perhaps because it was from outside of, why aren't you doing more? Strive to do better. Build upon that skill. Be better, be better. And instead it's like, no, Mary Had a Little Lamb, I'm so good at. And it sounds so great. And I'm smiling the whole time while I'm doing it. Or not, because the recorder's in your mouth, but emotionally smiling. Yeah, I'm wondering too, we didn't talk about this in the prep. So if you're like, I don't know, I haven't thought about that, I can cut this out. But I was just curious, for those of us who are parents, how do we pass this on to the future generations? How do we recognize the behaviors and the patterns in the kids? How do we articulate to them in a meaningful way, like, it's okay to mess up, or that doesn't have to be perfect, or I understand that that's not the best way that you learn. Let's try to find different things. Like, what does that look like? Maybe if you don't mind sharing, either in your own parenting journey or kind of what you share with your coaching clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So our kids are learning from what we do far more than what we say to them. So the best way to raise happy children who understand who they are and don't feel a lot of peer pressure is to model that behavior, which I know is really, really hard. But even modeling that you care about it and you're making small steps can be important. So, depending on the age of the child, if you are doing some work on yourself, maybe you can talk in an age appropriate way about what you're doing. I mean, my kids watched me play the recorder from scratch to where I am now, and they came along with me. My eldest, I ended up buying a second recorder and then a third recorder, and my eldest will take his grade one, in the next few weeks or months.
Yeah.
My youngest was too young to really want to kind of follow music, but he loves holding it and making noises and sometimes exploring different notes,
Mhm.
without being constrained by a piece of music that someone else has written.
Yeah.
And we let that be okay. And I think that teaches kids a lot more than sitting them down and giving them a lecture. Um, with neurodiversity, or neurodivergence, one of the things that many neurodivergent people have is a sense of binary thinking. So everything is either great or it's terrible. And of course, this fits into perfectionism. And it's a really important thing to try not to pass on to your children, because it leads to catastrophizing. So when something goes wrong, in particular, we don't want to say, and everything is always going to go wrong now, because we will give our children that mindset. And that
Yes.
mindset is quite correlated with pessimism and depression later in life. So we
Mhm.
want to try and see things in their right perspective.
Mhm.
So we burnt the toast and now we're late for school. It's not, I'm a helpless mum and we can never get out of the house on time. It's, this is really frustrating. it's difficult for us to get out of the house this morning. You know,
Yes.
by making it about this instance, not making it a global thing, we give our children a much healthier message.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness, yes. I'm such a fan of the mindset idea too. The like we're either born with this thing, this skill, this ability, or the idea of growth. And I will say, very rarely is anyone all one thing, all one thing. I should have that tattooed across my forehead at this point. I say it so often, but like the idea that Selena Gomez is popping into my mind for some reason. She was born with a greater ability to sing beautifully than was I. So there are certain things that we are more naturally better at or something, certainly. I do want to hold some space for that. But I do really believe that if we are really passionate about something and we put our energy and efforts into it, that we can get better. I get so frustrated when I hear people my age or even younger, especially younger now, oh, I'm not good at math. Because somebody in what, third grade told you you weren't good at math, and then you just decided the rest of your time. And again, I'm not blaming the person, and I'm certainly not blaming the teacher. We all did the best we could. But that's a mindset. That's an idea. And perhaps, yes, there are people who can calculate a 43% average of something of across 7 numbers in their minds immediately. And I don't know if I could even repeat to you the numbers I just said. So yes, and that doesn't mean we shut down and we say, and therefore I'm never going to be able to get better. And so being able to express that to our children, getting out of that black and white thinking. I love that you brought this up, because sometimes we do feel in that stress and overwhelm of parenting. Well, then fine, I'm just the worst mother, or we don't need to go on with any other examples. And being intentional about, first for yourself, of course, and understanding that what you say around is going to be internalized by your children. If mom thinks that this one failure by her means the world is ending, what does that mean for my failures in my life? And so it's very important for us, again, to be kind to ourselves, but also recognizing that little ones are watching and hearing and understanding and interpreting.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can acknowledge the struggles while keeping them localized and not letting them spread to everything. So
Mm.
you talked about maths. I could have decided I was bad at maths when I was at school.
Mhm.
That wouldn't be true, because maths is a really complicated, broad subject. And in fact, I now have a degree in maths from Cambridge, and I've used maths, degree level maths, professionally in my past career, which not many people genuinely do.
Sure.
I'm not good at maths by any stretch of the imagination, but I did find learning my times tables really hard. I
Mhm.
have dyslexia, and learning that kind of information is really difficult for my brain. Hard is not the same as impossible. So my children have some of the same struggles. I have more understanding of how it impacts them and how to help them, so they will end up learning their times tables.
Mhm.
It will still be harder for one of them than for other children.
Mhm.
But we don't need to extrapolate that to bad at maths. We can just say learning your times tables is hard for you.
Yes. Yes, that's exact right. That's, gosh, I just, it's so important that to be able to say, this is a thing that is not as easy, or this is a thing where I need more work, but not, and then the world ended, and then shut it down. I'll never do that. Also, a maths degree from Cambridge. That's fascinating. I love that. That's wonderful. I'm actually, sorry, this is a quick tangent. Sorry, listener, but I've actually been to Cambridge. We did a little punting down the beautiful, beautiful area, of course. But yeah, and I hope that people feel encouraged by that in these kind of conversations where I think we do catastrophize, like, this was a problem for me and therefore it will be a problem for my children, or we'll pass that down. And, my husband and I certainly have joked, he has ADHD diagnosed in the 90s. So do I have ADHD diagnosed in the 90s. And we're like, our children don't stand a chance and all that. And while we do make that joke, and my 4-year-old definitely does display some tendencies, we're really intentional about not saying, and therefore these are the things that everyone will be bad at. And I don't know. I actually was thinking too about the idea of like learning alongside the kids, and I want to make sure that I don't swing that pendulum too far the other way and like, oh, you're playing basketball, let me play with you every 5 seconds, or but also utilizing that, right? And being interested in the things that the kids are interested in, and using that as a time for togetherness and growth, and showing them, oh, I just can't seem to get this transition from this note to this note right, or can't seem to make that free throw work, and let me show you the things I'm going to do to practice and try. While we're also being kind to ourselves, we're also showing them that as well, that ability to function in the fail and learn the pivots and the growth mindset.
Yeah, and just to not put any more pressure on any listeners who might already be feeling like life is too hard, you don't have to get this right every time either. It's not
Mm-hmm.
an thing to get right every time.
Yes.
You know, sometimes you manage to create learning opportunities where your children see you struggle and grow, and other times you just don't have the patience and you're in a hurry and you want to get out the door. Like
Yes.
that's okay because you're human.
Yes.
And we can repair, you know, if we have a particularly bad moment and we think actually that wasn't the message that I wanted to pass on, we can go back and talk about it.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to say that I love an opportunity to apologize to my children, but when they arise, I'm grateful for them. Like I remember one time, this is talking about kind of getting in an emotionally dysregulated space, and where it's our job to stay regulated so they can be dysregulated, and how do we help all of that? And it is very important. But I remember one time my son did something, and I was like, what did I say? It was like, I said, cut that out, and not kindly. And he goes, you cut it out. And I was like, okay. So that was me displaying to you how to inappropriately ask for a change in behavior. I was not regulated. Of and of course, we talked about that in the moment. I was like, I'm so sorry. That was really rude of me to say, wasn't it? And he said, yes. And I was like, so let's maybe both not talk like that anymore. Obviously, I don't want a 4-year-old to feel like he can just snap back at anybody, but a learning opportunity where we use that parenting guilt. And I say parenting intentionally, not the same as mom guilt. That's another conversation for another podcast, but being able to say, like, I'd like to do better in that moment. And here's how I can learn from it, because again, we're not expecting perfection from ourselves, even in the parenting journey. And as much as we can teach, like, here's where I'm failing at singing the song or playing this game, I can also show you where I wasn't regulated or my emotions weren't my best, and what I do to make amends to people thoughtfully, and how I want to be intentional about changing that in the future. So again, they're having that modeled instead of just, I'm always happy, I'm always smiling, everything's wonderful, and I never feel frazzled. Not real life. And then if they do see layers of that, that's what they're going to have to try to internalize for themselves moving forward. Like, well, my mom was never stressed out, so I guess I'm not allowed to be either. Ooh, not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's really wonderful. What are some things that you find are the most helpful for people kind of starting out with their focus journeys when they're feeling that things just kind of aren't on track? The anxiety is there because the perfectionism or the procrastination or the imposter syndrome. What are kind of some of your first go-tos for people?
Yeah, so it really depends where you are and what your goals are. But what I remember when I wasn't yet diagnosed with ADHD and I had a small baby, and it was such a big life change, and I was overwhelmed with anxiety about getting out the front door because there is so much planning that goes into getting a baby out of the front door.
For sure.
And what I really wish someone had said to me was make a list of all the things that you need and stick it to the inside of your front door. And then you won't have to worry that you forgot something. You can just go down the list. And then when they need a last minute nappy change, you can go back down the list again. And you can go down the list as many times as you need until you are confident that it is okay to leave.
Yes. I really love a list, and I acknowledge to people a lot of times that it feels really tedious. Like, oh, I have to think about all these things that are done. It's like, right, but the more work that you put in some more work up front, and then eventually you get to a space where it doesn't feel so rigorous and so tedious, because it feels more second nature, or at least you've done it enough where it feels doable. So I love that idea. That's so great. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. It's been such a great time sharing stories and information. I know you have a workbook and a website. Could you share with everybody how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can email me. I'm anna@grantacoaching.com. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, or now X. You can find my website at www.grantacoaching.com. Be great to hear from you.
Yes, I'd love that. And those will all be in the show notes, of course. So if anybody needs access to that below. So thank you again for the time. It's been such a pleasure. And for everyone out there, be curious, not judgmental, and we'll see you back here next time.